Good evening and welcome to Burlington and beyond. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're surviving this winter okay. It's been pretty easy so far. My name is Paul Girouard and I'm joined tonight by Mike King from the Massachusetts Family Institute. Hey, let me just give you a little background on Massachusetts Family Institute. Their mission and statement is recognizing that healthy families are indispensable to the preservation of a strong and free society. Massachusetts Family Institute is dedicated to strengthening the family and affirming the Judeo-Christian values upon which it was based. Established in 1991, MFI is a nonpartisan public policy organization dedicated to strengthening families in Massachusetts. MFI engages in research and education on a wide range of public policy issues to strengthen the well-being, health, and safety of families, its individual members, and the collective unit. So I'm joined by Mike King tonight, and he's the Director of Community Alliances. Welcome, Mike.
It's good to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you were here about a year ago, I think.
Yeah.
We had a great discussion, and
Yeah.
you brought us up to speed on what's going on at the State House and
Yeah.
legislation and some
Yeah.
of the social issues going on. So it's great to have you back, and
Thank you.
looking forward to getting an update on what's changed and what's
Yeah.
different or new. And
For sure.
so thanks for coming.
Yeah, and since I was here about a year ago, a lot of the things that we talked about at that time, we've had a lot of victory. So I think a lot of times in these conservative circles in Massachusetts, when sometimes you feel a little isolated, it's good to know that there's still victory for standing up for the sanctity of life, for religious liberty, for the definition of marriage, regarding these gender struggles that we're having with our young kids, sex education, physician-assisted suicide, the counseling ban, marijuana, the list goes on in the state.
Right.
But we want to be your advocate. We want to be the advocate to all Massachusetts residents to know what is going on at your state house and what's going on in your public school so that we can protect the young minds of our kids. And I always like to point to the verse James 1:27 that we can protect the widow, that we can protect the orphan, and that we can keep our kids' minds from being polluted by the culture in many ways. And we always say that if we're to protect the orphan, then how can we protect the orphan if we allow for things like late-term abortion, for example? If we protect the widow, how can we allow for physician-assisted suicide? If we are to keep our kids' minds from being polluted by this world, how can we allow pot shops to show up on our street corners, or the over-sexualization of our kids when it comes to Planned Parenthood's sex education programs? So there's a lot to cover in Massachusetts, but I definitely appreciate being here and having the opportunity to update you once again.
Thank you. Well, it's great having you here, and you have a yearly lobby day.
Yes.
So that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
If you want to let the viewers know about that.
Yeah, that's kind of our annual Christmas, if you will. So we would hope, we're hoping for 500 people to come out to Lobby Day this year. And I think that we can do it and exceed it. We've been speaking at churches pretty much every Sunday. This Sunday I'll be out in Worcester speaking at a almost 500 member Hispanic church, and then going down to Plymouth. It's going to be a long day to another church down there in Plymouth. But yeah, we're excited about Lobby Day. Lobby Day, it's our pro-family annual Lobby Day. It starts at Park Street Church at 10 a.m. This is Wednesday, March 20th. Wednesday, March 20th, starting at 10 a.m. at Park Street Church. We do a short training like you'll see tonight. And then we provide you a pizza lunch. So for any other reason, for no other reason, just come for the pizza. And then we all walk up to the State House together, and everyone that goes has an opportunity to speak face to face with their state representative and their state senator regarding so many of these issues. We give you the talking points, we train you. And I can't tell you the amount of people that go to the Lobby Day and say, wow, what an amazing experience, that they can now be even more engaged moving forward. So we really want to create a culture of getting in touch with your legislator, because you know as well as I do that most people don't even know who their state senator is, who their state rep is, and we want to educate them on that.
Right. And the great thing is, a lot of people say, how can I make a difference? Well, there's a perfect example that, you don't know exactly what to do, but you show up and you follow your program, and then before you know it, you're talking to your legislator and you are making a difference.
Yeah, and we want to make it as easy for people to get down there too. So we provided a bus from 6 different locations in Massachusetts, and one of those locations is Burlington. So, those that live in Burlington have no excuse to say I can't find parking down in Boston, where they can get the bus. And it's only a suggested donation of $10 to get on the bus, and of course, and that includes lunch. So that's the best deal in town.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's new maybe you could update us a little bit from, you mentioned some victories. How about, what are some of the good things that have happened?
Let's start with physician-assisted suicide. So last winter, we had about 20 doctors come down to the State House. And it wasn't just the doctors, but they had an enormous impact. And those 20 doctors, their influence went a long way to defeat physician-assisted suicide last year. So that was a major victory. We'll talk more about the sex education mandate, which again we defeated last year. And all these bills that I'm telling you about now are back, right? I mean, as well as I do that the other side on these issues, they just never stop pushing the agenda. And so the sex ed mandate, which would basically take away local control from, let's say in Burlington, so you have a school committee, as you know. So your school committee, if this bill were passed, would only have a certain list of sex ed curricula to choose from. You couldn't go out and find your own curriculum. You'd have to choose from a template that the state gives you. And perhaps those might all be Planned Parenthood, Get Real, Making Proud Choices, these curriculums that if you really look into them, you and I talked before, what we'd say regarding the sex education, and it's so incredibly pornographic that, you and I are uncomfortable talking about it on this particular program. And just imagine, our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders learning about, all kinds of different ways to be sexually active in a 6th grade classroom. So the sex ed mandate was defeated. Physician-assisted suicide defeated. There was something called the counseling ban. Counseling ban would have basically a therapist that gives what they call conversion therapy. So if a child that identifies as transgender comes into your your counseling couch and you convert them away from being transgender, that would be considered child abuse, and so you could be prosecuted for child abuse. And even that minor, 17 years or younger, who wants to transition, was, as the other side says, was born perfect, right? As someone that identifies as transgender, but they feel like they want to be in their anatomical skin, well, they would be committing child abuse against their own bodies under this law. So miraculously, the counseling ban was defeated last year, but again, it's back. And then lastly, we'll talk some about commercial marijuana tonight. And 250 towns and cities have taken action to restrict commercial marijuana. There's 351 total towns and cities in Massachusetts, so 250 is a pretty good number.
Quite a bit.
Probably 2/3. So 100 of those cities have actually banned it, and 150 have passed a moratorium. So we're excited to see so many towns and cities taking action to keep commercial marijuana, not talking about medical, talking about commercial marijuana off of their street corners. So probably the most impactful, successful year legislatively that I think we've ever had in our 27, 28 years of being here in Massachusetts. And I think it has a lot to do with people like yourself and your wife, people, that we've talked at many churches, people really starting to get active and calling their state representatives and senators.
Well, people are starting to wake up that you can't just sit by idly. You have to have a hand in it, because if you don't say anything, as you know, like we've said, people don't know who the legislators are.
Right.
How do you hold them accountable if you don't even know who they are? So.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, regarding the counseling ban, we feel like when we live in Massachusetts, right, that we sometimes we're called the blue of blue, the bluest of blue states, or maybe just one notch under California or whatever it is. But keep in mind that the counseling ban has been passed in New Hampshire, It's been passed in Rhode Island, but it has not been passed in Massachusetts.
Wow.
You know, other states have passed physician-assisted suicide, not passed in Massachusetts. States like Colorado that have legalized marijuana and have, more pot shops than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. We have those 2 shops in Northampton and Leicester that opened, and I think a handful are slotted to open soon. Some in Salem, I think some in Boston. But it's been a very slow rollout, and much of that is because towns and cities have said, we don't want this in our town or city. So, as liberal as Massachusetts stereotypically is, we have not passed a lot of those laws that we are so concerned about.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great to hear an update.
Yeah.
And I think I even heard, was it regarding the pot shops, was it in Lawrence where there was a huge turnout against it, and surprisingly they were able to stop it in Lawrence?
Yeah, well, Lawrence is an amazing story. If every city and town were Lawrence, Massachusetts would look like Kansas, okay? And it's all because of the church, and it's all because of the Hispanic church. Lawrence is, I think, 95% Hispanic. And there's 120 Hispanic churches that we've partnered with in Lawrence. 120. Wow. Did you know that there were 120 churches in Lawrence?
No
I had no idea either. And those are just the Hispanic churches, right, that are part of this particular organization that we worked with. So they got very excited about working with us on the marijuana issue. And in, I think it's June or July of 2017, 200 of them showed up. With signs. I don't even know if we told them to bring signs. I think they just thought of that on their own, right? And they were out there 15 minutes before the city council meeting started, and they were picketing out there saying, no pot shops in Lawrence. And then there was about 4 hours of testimony, pastors getting up from the pulpit, if you will, in the city council chambers, talking about how, the New Testament talks about marijuana not being a great idea. Now, I don't know, I haven't seen marijuana as text in the New Testament, but, they did a great job, talking about how it's not good for Lawrence. And then, moms getting up and saying how this has destroyed their families and it's been a gateway drug. And, now it's just so much more heavily concentrated with THC. So anyway, about 11:30 at night, I could show you a picture sometime. You see the city council members with their fists on on their cheeks, and they're ready to go home. And at 11:30 at night, the city council votes 8-0 to ban commercial marijuana in Lawrence. Wow. So you cannot open a pot shop in Lawrence because of the local church. And the local church, those 120 churches, they make up about 5,000 people of the 85,000 people that live in Lawrence. So that's what, 7%? So 7% of the population of Lawrence has made it possible, has protected the young minds of youth in Lawrence by getting active. 200 people showed up at City Hall, and that was enough. I mean, how many churches do we know that have more than 200 people? Right?
Well, when you get 200 people to show up for something, you know that the community's serious about it.
That's right. That's right. And, I'll tell you one other thing about Lawrence. Lawrence, so you remember question 3, the bathroom bill issue, which, unfortunately, statewide we lost about 68-32, I want to say. Well, Lawrence was the only city in Massachusetts to vote no on question 3 in the majority, right? There were 5 towns in Massachusetts that voted no in the majority, and there was 1 city, and that was the city of Lawrence. And again, there's no other reason that we can look to other than the local church educating their churches and those people educating their friends and family and voting no on that question. So, they've just been so inspired and inspiring. And now one of their main missions is to introduce sex education into their public schools that values abstinence, that values marriage, and isn't this crazy over-sexualizing Planned Parenthood stuff that we have to deal with. So really been encouraging.
That'd be amazing, yeah. So how much work is it to keep track of all this legislation coming? I assume it's a lot of work to keep on top of everything coming down the pipeline, to be at the State House, just to know what's going on. It must be a lot of work to keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, there's, as you know, every state needs an advocate, like Massachusetts Family Institute. 40 states in our union have an advocate, and we'd like to see all 50 states get an advocate. I mean, unfortunately, I think one of the reasons why Rhode Island has passed all these crazy bills is because they have no advocate. So if there's even someone watching tonight or watching a recording, and you feel led to do this kind of work down in Rhode Island, please let us know. Call our office. We'd love to talk to you. If you know people that want to financially support it, please let us know. But look, there's about 6,000 bills that get introduced into the State House every 2-year legislative session. So could you imagine? I mean, do you have time to go through 6,000 bills?
No.
On what's concerning to the sanctity of life, religious liberty, natural marriage, the gender issue, the counseling ban. I mean, all these different things. So of course we need it. We need a Paul Revere in every state to ring the bell and let people know. So yeah, it can be overwhelming, but we are more than happy to do that. And if you're watching tonight and you're part of a church or a community group that would value having us come and giving a half-hour presentation, an hour presentation, regarding these issues, we would value that opportunity to come and have a Q&A and very much like tonight, just raise awareness to a lot of things going on.
Great. And how can they get in touch with you? What's your website?
Yeah, our website is MA for Massachusetts, mafamily.org, mafamily.org. They can also they can email me directly at michael@mafamily.org. Again, it's michael@mafamily.org.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
So, a lot going on. Boy, it's hard to, where do you start, right? As you've just mentioned, all the bills that are introduced.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, just to say a little bit more, there's so much we could say about commercial marijuana tonight. And I want to point out a couple of things. We're currently working with a coalition of churches in Waltham. So we're working with the Ugandan church, the Hispanic church, the Portuguese church, the English or Anglo church, however you want to describe it, in Waltham right now. About 200 solid advocates right now and growing. And we've been to the city council now. We've been to City Hall 3 times as a group. We've been to another strategic meeting as a group. I was just this past Sunday talking at a Ugandan group. I was on Ugandan radio. I was telling you earlier that Waltham has the largest Ugandan population in Massachusetts. And so anyway, we are very encouraged to see all that's going on there. And what we're trying to do in Waltham is get the city council to put a question on the ballot and let the people of Waltham vote in the fall of 2019, in November of 2019. Waltham was a city, like many, that voted yes in 2016, but that doesn't mean that they can't put a question on the ballot and still ban pot shops. There's a city council that said, oh, the people voted in 2016, and so we've already done this, and we just have to deal with it, right? Well, tell that to the town of Acton. Acton, it's not far from here, right down Route 2. Acton just had 1,100 people show up at its town hall meeting. When's the last time you had 1,100 people show up at town hall? Never?
No idea. Never.
Right. Well, 76% of the people that came that night, 76% of the 1,100 people voted to ban commercial marijuana in the town of Acton. And what makes that even more impressive is that Acton was a yes town in 2016. We've actually done studies. We studied 25 yes towns that took a local vote. 21 out of the 25 voted to ban commercial marijuana. That's 84%.
So what does that tell you? They didn't understand the question, or?
Well, it tells you a lot, right? I think a lot of people did think they were voting for medical, right? Because you probably got the same postcard that I got that had a picture of a doctor, right, telling you to vote yes on question 4. So yeah, I think a lot of people were snookered,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
you don't use that word all the time,
Right.
into thinking it was medical. And then I think once people really understood what commercial is, you know, over 50% of the sale of marijuana in Colorado, over 50% is edibles.
Right.
Edibles. And what do they look like? Reese's peanut butter cups, Almond Joy,
Candy. Right.
gummy bears. There
Mhm.
was the story in Holden, Massachusetts recently, 2 middle school kids on a bus in Holden, Massachusetts, just north of Worcester,
Mhm.
out pretty close to where that new pot shop is in Leicester,
Mhm.
right? 2 middle school students eating gummy bears on the way to school. Both of them rushed to the hospital because the gummy bears were laced with THC. And THC, we understand now that anything over 15% THC, 15%, doesn't sound like a lot. Over 15% THC is considered a hard drug.
Hmm.
And then statistically, we also know that from an addiction standpoint, if you are an early user, so a teenager, if you are an early user of today's marijuana, of today's commercial marijuana, it is just as addictive as heroin.
Hmm.
So imagine, you know, when did kids get addicted to cigarettes? Right? When they were teenagers.
Teenagers. Yeah.
And it's the same playbook.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about this issue, you know, we're not, you know, the other side likes to say you're just a bunch of prohibitionists, you know, and
Right.
that didn't work in the 30s or whatever, and you're all back and that's hogwash,
Mhm.
right? We are concerned about a teen addiction epidemic. And when people say we legalize alcohol, so let's legalize marijuana, it is comparing apples to oranges. Both have horrible effects, right? But a glass of wine at night is not going to do the same as that little gummy bear that middle school student ate on the way to school, right?
Right.
So people need to understand that this is not the 3 to 4% THC marijuana that they were smoking in the 70s and 80s. This is a highly concentrated THC product that is specifically marketed as edibles in many cases, and even things that look like energy drinks and vapes. I mean, we could talk more about vapes that kids get their hands on. So any, you know, I think just logically thinking person would see the danger in this and say, you know what? We don't need commercial marijuana in Massachusetts.
Right. And this education is key. I mean, just
Yeah.
bringing out these facts that people are just not aware of.
Yeah, there was a great book that just came out from Alex Berenson, I want to say. And it's called Tell Your Children. And he's getting lambasted on social media, but he basically makes the point that that is coming out more and more, which is today's commercial marijuana leads to psychosis. And so basically what cigarettes did to your lungs,
Mhm.
marijuana does to your brain. And so the question is, how much do we care about the health of our teens' brains when it comes to this drug?
Well, that's so. What type of do we have any legislation pending here, or?
Yeah, we do. And another great reason to come out to Lobby Day on Wednesday, March the 20th. Would it surprise you? Probably not, but because we live in Mass, right? But there are 30 to 40 bills that want to increase access to commercial marijuana that are up for a vote this legislative term. So there is a huge reason to come to Lobby Day and talk to your legislator about this. For
Good
sure.
to know.
Yep.
So what do we have next? That's
Well, I guess we could talk about the wonderful subject of sex education in our
it's
public
always
schools.
interesting in Massachusetts,
That's
right?
right. You know, I won't get too far into depth about it, but I don't know if it would surprise the viewers that today's sex education in our public schools is authored by Planned Parenthood, right? A third to half of Planned Parenthood's budget is abortion, right? And some people might think I'm a conspiracy theorist for saying this, but just think about it. We know that Planned Parenthood is selling baby parts for profit, right? Harvesting young children, young unborn children. And so it would be in their economic interest to increase teenage pregnancy, right? to increase the amount of abortions
Make a lot of money off
that
it.
happen, right? So what do we hear all the time? Safe sex, right? And so here Planned Parenthood is talking about safe sex. Well, then doesn't that go against your business plan? If you're going to have safe sex, then you won't have any unwanted pregnancies and thus no abortions, right? Well, if you look into, I was showing you some pamphlet earlier, but they're redefining what abstinence is. So they tell us all the time, abstinence-based education does not work, right? Well, if you look how they define abstinence, it's literally 35 to 40 terms, okay, that talk about every single possible way to have sex, right? But do it safely, right? And so what it does is they hide behind safe sex, but really what's happening is kids are like, oh, I never thought about that, right? And then their imagination runs wild. And then you couple that with being on the smartphone and being able to have access to all kinds of pornography or whatever it might be. And now it's just the highway has become totally open. In one of the definitions of safe sex in one of them is to get non-microwavable saran wrap. Need I say more, right? The only change that they made on that between last year and this year is that it's too hard to find non-microwavable saran wrap at CVS because we tried and we used it as a prop when we were at the State House. We said, did you know that this is in your sex education? So if it's hard to find for us, I'm sure it's hard to find for students. And so now I think they've made it either microwavable or non-microwavable, just get some kind of saran wrap. I mean, it's just the fact that you and I are even talking about this is outrageous.
Now, is this currently in the public schools, or this is what they want to put in the public schools?
This is in the Get Real 7th grade.
7th grade.
7th grade curriculum.
So parents should be aware of what is being taught to
Yeah,
their children.
and they're not even, the saran wrap's just the beginning,
I'm
right?
sure.
I mean, if you're in a pinch and you need a contraceptive, right? I mean, just go in the kitchen drawer, right? I mean, this is what they're telling you. I mean,
7th graders.
7th graders. Yeah. It's very concerning. So one of the things we talked about was the sex education mandate, right? And how this is a bill that they want to pass at the state level, so our state legislators want to take basically the Planned Parenthood, Get Real, Making Proud Choices, whatever it is, and say, okay, this is the list that you can choose from for your health frameworks, okay? Because it's evidence-based, it's age-appropriate. Is it really age-appropriate? I mean, come on. I mean, we could be here all night talking about stuff that's ridiculous. But they want to make this list at the state level, so now your school committee says, oh, we'd like to go and use Healthy Futures, which we'd love for them to use, right? Or New Culture, or some kind of curriculum that actually values abstinence and actually defines it as abstaining, right? It's a very simple definition. But no, the state wants to have its own list and says to Burlington or whatever the school committee says, you need to choose from this list. And so I ask Burlington residents, I ask whoever's watching this, do you want the state to control that list, or do you want to have the freedom to choose from whatever curriculum for your school? I mean, we just had this debate in Worcester, right? And it's still going on. Thankfully, because of the outcry of Worcester residents, the school committee decided to not take in Planned Parenthood sex education. They're sticking with something called the Michigan model. And, and I think part of the reason maybe they kicked the can down the road is because they're hoping the sex ed mandate, passes, and now they're forced to tell people,
right, we have no choice.
We have no choice, right?
Right.
But hopefully also the outcry of the residents made the school committee think twice and say, we don't want Making Proud Choices. We don't want Planned Parenthood because enough people think it's a bad idea.
Right. So yet another great reason to show up for the lobby day.
Yes.
And make your voice heard.
Absolutely. We didn't even really talk about the gender issue too, right? with sex education, and this can be such a triggering issue, right? And so, in no way do I want to minimize the suffering that so many of our kids. Look, our kids statistically are 10 times more likely to question their gender than adults. 10 times, right? And why is that? Well, you only need to look into the education that they're getting at school, right? Do you know how early we are starting gender identity education in our schools?
It's probably kindergarten.
Preschool.
Preschool. Wow.
It's called the gender unicorn. And there's 5 different spectrums that you can identify on. Now, most preschoolers, do they even know how to count to 5? Right? I mean, maybe the advanced ones do, right?
Yeah.
Like your kids maybe. But why in the world are we teaching gender identity in preschool, if not to just normalize everything? Yeah. Right? And then as you go into elementary school, it's called the gender-bred person, right? So it's teaching our kids that as fact, that your gender comes from your brain and has 0 to do with your anatomy. Now, are you a man because you think you're a man?
I was born this way.
Right, you anatomically present as a man, right? But they hide it again as an anti-bully education, right? And so what I would say is, can we not teach our kids to be sensitive, to be compassionate, to be understanding? Can we still do that? But we don't have to normalize a behavior that basically tells a tomboy girl that, you know what, you have male tendencies, and you might have been anatomically born as a girl, but because you have these male tendencies, maybe you are 50% more masculine, 75% more masculine. I mean, if you go on Facebook, you can choose from over 50 different genders. So when you think about these spectrums, just break those spectrums up into like 50 different parts, right? So maybe I'm 5/50ths more masculine as a woman, right? And now you start to question, right? And maybe, you know, you're going through a tough time in life or whatever it might be. And you decide, you know what? I really was a boy born as an anatomical girl. And then the doctor prescribes you puberty blockers and hormones, and we find that those can sterilize young girls. So let's just say that girl, she becomes, statistically, we know that once that girl turns 19, 75 to 90% of those girls will choose their anatomical skin, right? But let's just say that 19-year-old tomboy chose to be a boy at age 12, started taking the puberty blockers, sterilized her body, and then by the time she turned 19, she was like, I think I made a mistake. I want to be a girl again, but I want to have kids. It's been stolen. It's been stolen from her. And we can't just be silent and be like, oh, they're going to call me a bigot or a hater for saying what I just said, when this story is happening, and 75 to 95% is a big number. We know that many kids are going to choose their anatomical skin when they turn 19, 20, 21. So we have to have this conversation and say, stop normalizing a behavior that is really hurting a lot of our kids. And this kind of stuff is being normalized. I mean, the high school curriculum says it has 5 different spectrums, and it says your gender identity can be fluid. Pick today how you feel, but don't feel limited. You can choose something different tomorrow.
Now, is this being taught statewide? Is this mandated?
I go all over the state. I speak at churches every Sunday, and I ask this question all the time. I was in Belmont, Massachusetts, and there was a 17-year-old girl in the audience, and I said, have you seen this curriculum before? She said, I've had it for the past 4 years, right? And everybody in the church was just like, what?
People don't know.
They had no idea. Right. They had no idea. And she was so thankful that I had come and presented this material because she felt so isolated.
Right.
And she just felt that if I say anything, people at school are going to hate me. I'm going to be bullied. You know, what, social media, right? I mean, who wants to go through that nonsense, right? So this is really, I mean, people need to hear this side of the story, right? And look, I always say, if you want to identify a certain way, that is your prerogative and your choice. Let's just stop normalizing it in our schools. I mean, our law right now says that gender is a sincerely held belief. That's our law. That's what we all live under, right?
There was an attempt to change the registry form as well recently, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was an attempt to change the license, right? The driver's license. And I heard something else in the news lately. But yeah, I mean, this is pervasive.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
But, you know, I truly, truly believe that the vast majority of people in our culture really step back from this and say, is this really true? Is this really healthy for our kids? Because there are so many kids that are suffering right now because they're questioning something that our culture has told them is normal. You know, we look at the DSM-5, right? That's the psychiatric journal. Only 5 years ago called transgenderism a disorder, right? And then they changed it to dysphoria. But still in dysphoria, there's some confusion. Do we want to normalize confusion? I don't think so. So, you know, even more reason, like I said, to come to Lobby Day. You know, make sure that your school committee has the choice to choose a curriculum that's not going to normalize stuff like this and really protect the minds of our young kids.
Oh, that's good information. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. We can also talk about the late-term abortion, right? I mean, that's been. I'm sure you heard the story of Virginia's governor.
I did.
And of course, New York State. You know, and to know that Virginia's governor is a pediatrician.
That's frightening, right?
Yeah. You know, and I don't know if you saw, I'm sure you saw the radio interview with him where it said, you know, if the baby under this law was aborted but made it through the birth canal and into the world and it was still alive, right? He said, well, in that situation, we'd take the baby, we'd put him or her on a, you know, on this table over here while he or she suffered, right? And we'd just and we'd keep the baby comfortable. And then mom and doctor would have a conversation, right, about what we want to do with the baby. Making it seem like it's completely okay just to watch that unbelievably viable baby
born child
suffer and die.
Right.
I mean, what do you say to that?
Like speechless. I mean, what do you say?
Yeah. I mean, you have to have zero, I don't know, like conscience or feeling to just look at that baby and be like, we'll just let it die. It's so sad.
It really is. And
so upsetting. And in Massachusetts, we have a bill called the Roe Access Act. And another great reason to come to Lobby Day on Wednesday, March the 20th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., starting at Park Street Church. But this Roe Access Act is known as the Remove Obstacles and Expand Abortion Access. Is that what you want in Massachusetts regarding the sanctity of life?
Not at all.
Yeah. This bill would allow abortions on clearly viable babies with no requirement to preserve the life and health of the aborted child. Same thing that the Virginia governor was talking about.
In New York as well, right?
In New York as well. And you know as well as I did, the legislators were clapping and laughing, and you thought that they had just won. You thought the New York Giants had just won the Super Bowl again, you know, against the New England Patriots, right?
It's hard to fathom, really.
It is, and we put out a blog. So this is what the Roe Access Act would do. so the current Massachusetts law regarding abortion says the knowing destruction of the life of the unborn child. The knowing destruction of the life of the unborn child. Okay, that's how we describe abortion. This act would say any medical treatment intended to induce the termination of a clinically diagnosable pregnancy except for the purpose of producing a live birth. Sounds so much more sterile, right?
Right.
And normal and acceptable. This is how the current law defines pregnancy, the condition of a mother carrying an unborn child. Child, the word child is in there. This would change it to the presence of an implanted human embryo or fetus within a person's uterus. I mean, not even describing the mom as a woman, but a person, right? And then the definition for unborn child, current Massachusetts law, the individual human life in existence and developing from implant. So let me go back. The individual human life, okay, describing the unborn child, in existence and developing from implantation of the embryo in the uterus until birth, okay? So from implantation of the embryo in the uterus until birth. I mean, sounds like conception to birth, right? Definition deleted under the Roe Access Act. Just more information that, is just so concerning, right? I mean, the other side likes to say, choice, choice, choice. You know, we sanctify choice, right? I mean, so many people I know, not so many people, but people I know, even within my own family, right? I would never have an abortion, but I can't take away the choice of a woman, right? Well, what about the choice of the unborn child? Is that not sanctified? Right?
Right.
Very hypocritical.
It is, and it's also good to look up these bills. You can go to the state's website and look up who co-sponsors this legislation. I believe our state senator is one of the co-sponsors.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
I haven't looked up. Well, it hasn't made it to the House. There's no House bill yet officially, or?
Let's see. I'm not sure if we had the Senate bill and the House bill in here, but we wrote a whole blog, and people can also go on our website and under current legislation, under our website, it's a drop-down bar that says current legislation. We've done one-page write-ups on all the stuff that we are particularly concerned about, which makes it a little easier for people to kind of comb through stuff. So again, the website's mafamily.org, mafamily.org, and feel free to go there and check out those one-page briefs.
It's good to know because it's hard to filter through everything, but if you can go to your website and just get those one-page briefs and come up to speed quickly on what's going on. Yeah, and I think we were going to talk about assisted suicide, right? People probably watching remember in 2012, I'm sure you do, we narrowly defeated that through a referendum. It was 51-49. Close one. I think every 6 years you can have a referendum, so I guess the next one would have been 2018, but they're really trying to pass this legislatively. So, basically the same drugs that you take that would be given to someone on death row, right? The same drugs on death row would be available to someone if they wanted to end their life, right, through suicide. I even talk about my dad, who in 2005 was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was on his deathbed. And he definitely would have been, someone diagnosed with 6 months or less to live. Right.
At the time, we had my firstborn son, Jesse, and it was my dad's first grandson, my dad's first grandchild. And he had just been born. We get this really horrible news about my dad. We rushed down from Massachusetts to New Jersey. My wife has mastitis. Both of us haven't gotten sleep. We just saved my son from a possible SIDS incident, a few nights before or whatever. Just unbelievable things
Chaos,
going
right?
on. And we get down there and we have one of these like Mufasa moments where we hold him up from the street so my dad can see him, because he couldn't go in the room because he didn't want the germs or whatever. And so he's looking down at his first grandson, and we had named him Jesse because the name Jesse means God exists. And so we were proclaiming faith that my father would pull through through the name of his first grandchild. And Jesse today is 13, and my dad is still alive.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I say that story just to say, look, how many people, get diagnosed with 6 months or less to live, and not just live, but my dad's had a wonderful life. That was his first grandchild. Now he's got, I think, 12, 13.
Wow.
So he's been able to see all of his grandchildren be born. I mean, what an amazing gift, right? To have that time in your life to experience that. And the other side likes to call this death with dignity, right? I mean, is it dignified? Really? Is it dignified to, give my father the same drugs that they give to someone on death row? There's so much that can be said about this subject, and there's just not enough time to kind of go into both sides of it. But is this really how we want to sanctify life? When we have advances in hospice care and palliative care and care that can help with pain and suffering, there's just too much of a slippery slope. When we start to legalize suicide, and then people really start to take advantage of that. People become too expensive to medicate, right? Insurance companies are now looking at papers and saying, number 10096, no, it's going to be too expensive, so let's make the option of suicide available.
Right.
Is that?
That's not what we want. No, every life has an ultimate value on it.
Right. So again, another great reason I keep plugging. That's what I was trying to say. I keep plugging our annual lobby day. But again, Wednesday, March 20th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can text the word lobby to the number 797979, and you'll get a return text with more information on buses and that kind of thing. So again, text the word lobby to the number 797979.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, so we can see what else we haven't gone over. So how about the Engage program? Would you like to talk about that? You already touched on it.
Yeah. So, there's just, as you can see, there's just so much information to talk about regarding these important issues, regarding life, liberty, marriage, sex education, parental rights. We haven't really gotten into that. It's a big issue. Marijuana, right? So we've written a field guide, a handbook, if you will. It's an 8-week curriculum especially for churches or community groups or families. I used to be a youth pastor like your son, and I would actually go through some of this with my youth group, and I couldn't stop them from talking about all the things we were talking about because it's pervasive in their life, right? So it sets up as an 8-week curriculum, and it's called Engage the Bay State. We've put together a video that introduces every chapter. It's about a 25-minute video. Summarizes the entire chapter. We give you questions to ask at the end of the chapter. We give you at the beginning of the chapter, for those in the faith community, where you don't even have to be in the faith community to appreciate the Bible. We give a biblical understanding, a biblical worldview of why we believe what we believe. And then we say, okay, how did we get here regarding abortion or transgenderism or sex education or whatever it might be. What's the current legislation that we're concerned about? And then how do we work together to preserve a place in society for the religious liberties that this nation was founded on? And so it's a wonderful tool, and we'd love to see every church teach this on an annual basis for 8 weeks. People come to us and say, wow, I had no idea. They'll probably have a lot of the same reaction you're having maybe even right now, in terms of, wow, I didn't know all that stuff was going on in my school or at my state house. you'll have 100 times that reaction after going through the curriculum. And people can find that on the website mafamily.org/engage.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, just hearing a couple of the success stories that you've mentioned is enough to get people excited about, learning about this. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too that Engage is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese.
Wow.
In Mandarin Chinese, yeah.
Mm.
So we've had wonderful volunteers take the time to translate the entire book.
Mm.
So
That's great.
a big help. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like MFI has been busy on the front lines trying to keep an eye on everything going on at the State House. And
Yes. Yeah, it's a full-time job.
it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we could definitely use, I mentioned there's 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts. Did you know there's a Florida, Massachusetts?
Yes, I did.
I didn't know that, but there's 351 towns and cities, and we could use more people on staff to go to these towns and cities and go to especially the churches. It might surprise you that I was in Westfield, Massachusetts, and I spoke at a 1,000-member Russian church.
Mm. Who knew?
Who knew? Just down the street, a few weeks earlier, I was speaking at a 700-member Ukrainian church that had remodeled a Big Y, right? So they had a huge auditorium, and they gave me an hour and 15 minutes to speak. First time I had ever had a Russian interpreter.
Wow.
But an hour and 15 minutes, can you imagine?
That's great.
To talk about that on a Sunday morning. I spoke at a 1,500-member Hispanic church in Springfield, another 1,500-member Assemblies of God church out in that same area. And just church after church, whether it's from Pittsfield to Plymouth. I'll be March 1st, I'll be down in Falmouth. We're going to be putting on a seminar regarding religious liberty. Before that, I'll be at a school doing a chapel service for students and parents regarding a Christian worldview on these issues that we're talking about tonight. So it's just been so encouraging to go all over the state and talk at Chinese churches and Hispanic churches and Russian churches and Ukrainian churches and Haitian churches, Ugandan churches, and the list goes on. It's really been quite something. I mean, would it surprise you, Paul, if I said that there were 8,000 churches in Massachusetts?
That's a high number.
That's a high number.
Yeah.
A lot of times I ask that at churches. How many churches do you think are in Massachusetts? Some people will say, I think somebody said one time like 50. I said, well, it might feel that way. But as we said, there's 120 just in Lawrence.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We, without a doubt, the church is the largest, most organized body of people in the state of Massachusetts. By far. By far. Right? We had 300 people come down the State House when the bathroom bill was first being passed as a bill into law. They said we were the second largest group to come to the State House in that 2-year legislative session. The second largest, 300, right? I speak at 1,000 member, 1,500 member. I mean, just one church, right?
Yeah.
Would probably be the largest group to come to the State House. I mean, goodness, we had 1,000 Chinese people, Chinese friends of ours, show up at the State House for a bill they were concerned about. 1,000.
Wow.
They said they were the largest group to show up at the State House in 70 years.
Amazing.
70 years. When was that? It was 1950, right? So all that to say is I feel like sometimes we're like, the Wizard of Oz is behind the curtain, right? And he's got this booming voice, and it's the media, and it's academia, and we're like, oh, it's so intimidating, right? And I don't want to be that person.
Don't say anything, don't do anything. Right.
And then you kind of pull back the curtain, and you're looking up, and you're like, where's Oz? Where's the wizard? And then you look down, it's like, oh, that's the wizard, right?
Yeah.
I think to a large extent that's what it is. is we're so intimidated by the bullhorn, and we need to realize that there are a lot of people, even in Massachusetts,
Yes.
that agree with us on these issues.
Could be the majority too. It's a lot of people don't want to really get involved or don't feel like they really want to, but just showing up for something like this or contacting their legislators
Yeah.
when this stuff is pending for a vote,
Right.
can make a big difference.
Huge difference.
It really does.
Huge difference. I mean,
Well, like you said, a lot of this stuff came up last year.
absolutely, it's all back. And I always like to quote Martin Luther King. I've been blessed to have his same initials, MLK, but I'm nowhere near the figure that he was, of course. But Martin Luther King said that it is the duty of the church to be the conscience of the state, not the slave of the state, lest we become, as a church, a social club. And I think if we diagnosed a lot of our churches, I hear it sometimes, from pastors will say, we don't want to have you come speak because we don't want your message to be a distraction from the gospel. But when did the righteousness that we value in the Word of God, that is not only good for you and for me, but for our neighbors that don't even believe the same way we do, right? That it's good not to steal. It's good not to kill. It's good not to covet. It's good to honor your mom and your dad, right? I mean, and the list goes on. It's good to love your neighbor, right?
Right.
All these things are wonderful. And so I tell churches, look, we're not a cruise ship. We haven't, the local church hasn't survived for 2,000 years because we've just been cruising along. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Anyway.
Well, looks like we are wrapping up here. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our guest has been Mike King from the Massachusetts Family Institute. Hope you can make it out to Lobby Day, March 20th. Go to mafamily.org, and thanks for joining us tonight. Good night.